The frost clung to the shingles in a silver crust, catching the first thin smear of dawn. Elias Crow stepped onto the porch, boots crunching the hard ground, his breath a pale ghost before his face. The mule shifted in its pen, ears twitching at something above. He followed the animal's gaze. There, dangling from the ridge of the cabin roof, was a woman. Blonde hair tangled and windlashed, rope biting into her wrists, her body slack, swaying slightly with the morning breeze. For a heartbeat, Elias thought her dead. Then he saw her chest lift, shallow but steady. He frowned, chewing the inside of his cheek. "Well, darling," he muttered, "you're either trouble or my new house decor. And I don't much like decor." Moving quick now, he leaned the rifle against the wall, climbed the rain-slick ladder propped beside the porch, and cut the rope with his hunting knife. She dropped without a cry, and he caught her against his chest, staggering under the sudden weight. Up close, he could see the split in her lower lip, the faint swelling along her cheekbone. Her dress, a dusty blue thing, was torn at the hem and crusted with dirt. He glanced at the cabin door, and his jaw locked. Burned deep into the wood, letters black and raw at the edges, were two words, **Apache Lover**. The heat of the brand had split the timber. Whoever had done it wanted the message to last. A sound carried on the cold air, distant, sharp, unnatural. Not the wind. Not the mule. A single war whoop, far off, rolling down from the canyon like a thrown stone. Elias didn't wait to hear it again. He hauled her inside, kicked the door shut, and slid the iron bolt home. The cabin was dim, the single window shuttered against the wind. He laid her on the narrow cot in the corner and knelt beside her, testing her pulse. Stronger than he expected. She stirred under his hands, eyes flickering open for a moment, then closed again as if the sight of him wasn't worth the strength to keep them there. He tore strips from a clean cloth, dipped them in the pot of warm water he kept near the hearth, and cleaned the blood from her face. The rifle leaned within arm's reach. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of wood smoke from somewhere beyond his sight. Elias worked in silence, though his mind wasn't still. It drifted, unbidden, to another face, softer, smaller. His wife, Clara, holding their boy on the front steps of their old place down in Platte River country. That porch had burned in the raid, and so had they. He hadn't spoken their names out loud in 6 years. He wrung the cloth out hard, set it on her forehead. The mule brayed once, sharp and uneasy. She woke with a violent start, eyes wide and full of some private terror. Her voice cracked but carried urgency. "They'll kill you too." He sat back, studying her like a man measures weather. "That so?" Her gaze darted to the door, the shutters, then back to him. "You should have left me up there. That ain't my way." He kept his tone flat, though his fingers itched toward the rifle. The hoofbeats came before he saw them, slow, deliberate, circling. He crossed the floor, eased one shutter open an inch. 3 riders moved through the thin morning fog, their shapes vague but their intent clear. Dustcoat coats, hats pulled low. The one in front held a torch, though daylight was coming fast. They rode like men who had time, men who'd already chosen their ending for this place. The woman, Claire, though he didn't know it yet, watched him from the cot, her breathing shallow. Elias closed the shutter and reached for his hat, settling it low on his brow. His palm rested on the rifle's worn stock. "I'd been alone a long time," he said, more to himself than to her. He glanced once at the black words burned into his door. Then he looked back at her, at the bruises, the rope burns, the way she tried to hide the tremor in her hands. "Guess that ended today." Elias didn't waste time with more talk. The hoofbits outside shifted from a lazy circle to a tightening loop, the way wolves work a wounded elk. He crossed to the shelves, sweeping jerky, cartridges, and a canteen into a weathered steel bag. The woman watched him, eyes narrowing as though measuring the shape of his intentions. "You can't stay," she said. Her voice was stronger now, but still hoarse. "Didn't plan to," he answered, shoving the bag toward the door. "We ride south, cut across Devil's Run before noon. They won't expect that." "They'll expect everything," she muttered, sitting up with a wince. "And they won't stop." He stopped to face her. "Name?" She hesitated, then, "Claire Beaumont." The syllables carried an accent not born of these mountains, something Rivertown smooth. What'd you do to make enemies burn words into a man's door? Her mouth twitched. "I breathed. I loved the wrong man. Now they want to bury both mistakes." He gave her a look but didn't press. Sometimes the story could wait, the bullets couldn't. Outside, the torchlight bobbed past the shutter crack, then stilled. The air between them thickened. Elias pulled the door open in one motion, yanking her toward the mule already saddled. She stumbled, caught herself, climbed up without grace but without complaint. They were halfway to the canyon trail when the first shot split the morning. The mule jolted forward, his gelding right behind. Elias twisted in the saddle, firing once, twice, short bursts that kept the riders at a cautious distance. The gang fanned out, forcing them toward the narrowing canyon mouth. Another shot rang out, this one closer. A bullet tore past his ear, close enough for the heat to kiss his skin. Elias dropped his reins long enough to snap a shot back. One of the men jerked sideways and fell, the dust swallowing him whole. Claire clung to the saddle horn, teeth clenched against the jolts. He caught flashes of her in the corner of his vision, pale hair loose in the wind, eyes fixed forward, a line of determination cutting through the fear. They plunged into the canyon's shadow, the walls rising on both sides like the jaws of some ancient beast. Gunfire echoed sharp and uneven off the stone. The mules' hooves clattered against loose rock, each step a gamble. Elias felt the sting in his left arm before he saw the blood. It welled quick and hot beneath his sleeve, slicking the grip of his rifle. He cursed under his breath but kept the pace, driving them deeper into the twisting cut where the riders couldn't flank. The gang's shouts grew fainter. By the time they reached a bend that hid them from sight, the sound of pursuit had thinned to the occasional hoofbeat, cautious and probing. He pulled them into a narrow side ravine, dismounting in one fluid movement. "We stay here till dark," he said. Claire slid down, her knees nearly giving out. "You're bleeding." "It'll keep." He tied off the mule, scanned the high rim for silhouettes. They built no fire. Instead, they sat in the chill shade, backs to opposite walls, watching the cut where they'd entered. For a long while, neither spoke. When she did, it was without warning. His name was Daniel. Half Apache. Lived between worlds, belonged to neither. "I was supposed to marry someone else, a man with more money than mercy. Daniel didn't care about that." Her hands twisted in her lap. "They found us. They killed him. And they made sure I'd carry the shame. By branding you in words." She nodded once. "And now anyone who sees me knows exactly what they think I am." He studied her face, not the bruises, but the steadiness beneath them. "And what do you think you are?" Her gaze met his, unflinching. "Alive. For now." Night fell hard in the canyon, stars catching in the strip of sky above. The wind carried a new sound, faint, rhythmic, like a drumbeat too far to place. Elias lifted his head, listening. Claire heard it too. "That's not them," she whispered. "No," his voice was low. "That's Apache." Her eyes darkened. "If they find us, they won't care who I am or who I loved." He didn't answer. The sound carried on, neither nearer nor farther, steady as a heartbeat. Somewhere out there, someone was moving in time to it, and the canyon gave them no way of knowing whether the rhythm was welcome or the prelude to another hunt. The drumbeat came first as an echo, then as a presence. Out of the canyon's shadow emerged 4 riders, their ponies sure-footed on the loose stone. They moved without haste, spears upright, eyes watchful. Moonlight painted the beaded fringe on their sleeves, the lines of war paint drawn across their faces. Elias stood before they closed the gap, his rifle lowered but not out of reach. He stepped forward with deliberate calm, his voice carrying in a tongue roughened by years of disuse. He greeted them as a friend might greet a wary neighbor, offering the words without demand. The leader, a broad-shouldered man with a hawk feather tied in his hair, returned the greeting but did not smile. His gaze slid to Claire. She stood rigid under the weight of it, the mark on her skin barely hidden by her sleeve. One of the younger riders muttered something sharp, and the leader's eyes narrowed. Elias answered quickly, explaining what he could, that she was hunted, that the men chasing them were not of their people though they claimed to be. The leader dismounted, stepping close enough for Elias to see the scars etched along his jaw. He reached for Claire's arm, pulling back the fabric to reveal the brand. The firelight of a memory seemed to pass through his eyes. "They burned this to shame her," Elias said in his halting Apache, "and to soil your name." A long pause settled between them, heavy with the weight of decisions. Then the leader looked to his riders, said a single word, and they all dismounted. They shared strips of dried meat and water from leather pouches, the simple exchange sealing a fragile understanding. The leader, whose name Elias caught as Nantan, said they too hunted the gang. Imposters in Apache guise had been raiding settlements, stirring trouble that would bring the army down on both sides. At dawn, They rode together. The rhythm of hooves and the occasional grunt of the ponies were the only sounds for miles. Claire's shoulders loosened by degrees, though her eyes never rested. Elias rode behind Nantan, trading sparse words about the land ahead, 2 days to the river crossing, then each would go their own way. They camped by a shallow stream that night, no fire to draw eyes. In the thin light of the moon, Elias caught Claire smiling faintly when one of the younger riders tried, and failed, to teach her a trick with his knife. He found himself smiling too, though the sound of distant coyotes kept his hand near his rifle. The river came into view late on the second day, silver and restless under a clouded sky. They dismounted at the ford, water curling cold around their boots. Nantan signaled his men forward, but something in Elias's gut tightened. He scanned the far bank, the low scrub, the line of willows leaning toward the current. The first shot cracked from the tree line. A spray of water leapt beside Nantan's pony. Then the shouts came, familiar, hate-filled voices. The gang was here. Chaos ripped through the ford. Horses reared, water churned. Elias fired into the shadows, saw a rider fall, then spun to cover Claire. She had slipped from the saddle and was dragging one of the younger Apache to safety after a bullet found his leg. Another crack of gunfire. Elias turned in time to see an Apache rider, one who had kept too quiet the past 2 days, pull a pistol and fire into his own ranks. The betrayal was sudden but complete. The man's face was cold as stone as he swung his gun toward Claire. Elias's shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him into the shallows. Claire seized the dropped pistol, her hand steady as she fired once, ending the fight he'd started. The river stank of blood and churned mud. 2 of the gang fled back into the trees, the rest lay still. The current carried away splinters of wood from a shattered rifle stock. Elias felt the burn in his side before he saw the red soaking his shirt. His knees buckled, and the world tilted. Claire's voice cut through the din, urgent, raw. She pulled him toward the shelter of a boulder, the water lapping at their boots. "Stay with me," she said, her breath ragged. He tried to answer, but the edges of his vision closed in. The last thing he saw was the arc of her hair against the grey sky and the fierce set of her jaw as she aimed past him, ready to finish what they had started. The world returned in fragments, fires crackle, the smell of old timber, a shadow moving slow across the wall. Elias opened his eyes to a low ceiling, rough-hewn beams above him. His body ached in deep, pulsing waves, each breath catching on the stitch of pain in his ribs. Claire sat beside the cot, a strip of cloth in her hands dark with his blood. Her eyes lifted as she felt him watching. Relief softened her features, but her voice stayed steady. "You'll live. Though you came close enough to the other side to see it wave." He shifted, testing his limbs, finding the effort costly. The room was a forgotten miner's shack, dust thick in the corners, the air tinged with the scent of damp stone. Outside, wind worried at the boards, rattling them like bones. "How long?" he asked. 2 days. Nantan's men left at first light yesterday. Said they had their own trail to follow. He grunted, pushing himself upright despite the throb in his side. "You stayed. I wasn't going to haul you this far just to watch you die." She dipped the cloth in a bowl of water, wrung it out, and pressed it to his wound. "Besides, I owe you." He let the silence sit a moment, the only sound the steady drip from a leak in the far corner. Her face was close enough now for him to see the fine lines of exhaustion around her eyes, the smudge of dirt she'd missed along her jaw. They shared the shack for another day, the hours marked by the slow work of healing and the occasional exchange of words that meant more than they seemed. She told him about river towns and places where the horizon was lined with ships instead of mountains. He told her, haltingly, about Clara and the boy, about the fire that had emptied him. By the 3rd morning, his strength had returned enough to stand without the wall swaying. They saddled the mule in the grey light, neither speaking much. The trail ahead was narrow, hemmed in by cliffs. They didn't get far before the gang found them. It began with the snap of a twig in the brush, then the roar of a shotgun from the ridge. The blast struck the dirt at Elias's feet, spraying grit into his eyes. He dragged Claire behind a boulder as another shot chewed into the stone. The gang was smaller now, 3 men, but they came hard, firing as they advanced. Elias returned fire in short bursts, forcing them to duck and shift position. Claire moved beside him, calm despite the chaos, loading his spare revolver with swift, sure motions. One of the riders broke cover, charging down the slope with a knife in hand. Elias stepped into him, the 2 of them colliding in a tangle of limbs and grunts. The knife slashed his sleeve but found no flesh. He drove the man back, caught his wrist, and slammed him into the rock until he went limp. The leader came next, the torchbearer from that first morning. Up close, his face was sharp and hollow-eyed, a man built from spite and desperation. "Beaumont," he called, his voice cracking over the name. "Your fiancé sends his regards." Claire's shot answered him before Elias could. It caught the leader in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. Elias closed the gap, wrenching the rifle from the man's hands. They struggled in the dust, boots slipping, until Elias brought the stock down hard. The fight ended in the stillness that follows a storm. The last man fled into the rocks, his shouts fading. Elias leaned against the boulder, breathing hard. Claire stood over the leader's still form, her pistol hanging loose at her side. "That was him," she said quietly. "The one they sent to finish it." They left the bodies where they lay. The mountains would take them in their own way. By late afternoon, the sound of hooves announced the Apache riders. Nantan dismounted, scanning the scene with an expression that gave away nothing. He looked from Elias to Claire, then to the men on the ground. "You've done our work," he said. "And yours." Claire met his gaze without flinching. "No one will mistake them for your people again." Nantan inclined his head, the closest thing to thanks Elias expected. "You are welcome in our lands," he said, and then he and his riders were gone, swallowed by the passes. The trail wound on in silence. When the cabin finally came into view, its door still scarred with the burned words, Elias felt the weight of the last days settle into his bones. Claire dismounted, looking at the lonely shape of the place. "You going to keep it like that?" she asked, nodding at the door. He studied the brand for a long moment. "Maybe. Reminds me trouble finds you whether you go looking or not." She gave a faint smile. "Then maybe I'll stay. See if it comes back." He let the idea hang in the air, neither accepting nor denying it. The mule shifted, the wind stirred the trees, and the world felt less empty than it had in years. That night, under a sky heavy with stars, Elias spoke more to the dark than to her. "You can live alone in the mountains a long time. Long enough to think the world's done with you. Then it sends a stranger, bleeding, stubborn, and more alive than you remembered being. If that happens, don't turn her away." The fire's glow softened the hard lines of the cabin's walls, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, its voice high and mournful. The sound faded into the night, leaving only the steady breathing of two people who had both, in their own ways, survived.